Welcome to the last but certainly not the least session of the third Islamabad Literature Festival in the boardroom. This particular session is going to be equally exciting and intriguing, if not more, than the previous sessions. The session's title is A History of Pakistani Literature in English 1947 and 1988. Today we have on our stage two esteemed panelists, Mr. Dr. Tariq Rahman and Dr. David Waterman. Actually, I would like to, before we start on the session, I would like to inform you, please switch off your cell phones on silent, or you can power them off. And we will have a 30-minute session. The format of the session will be 20 minutes of discussion between our esteemed panelists and 10 minutes for question and answers. I will take this opportunity to introduce Dr. David Waterman. Dr. David Waterman is a professor at the University of La Rochelle, France, where he is a director of the Department of Applied Foreign Languages. And I would just only add that he's a funny man. Thank you.
That's not on my CV. Okay, well, it's a great pleasure for me to share the stage with you, Professor Rahman. Here's the book, A History of Pakistani Literature in English, 1947 to 1988, which was originally published in 1990 and then republished, relaunched by Oxford University Press, well, right now. But people had to twist your arm to get you to republish. I don't know if you have something to say about that, about your resistance.
Well, they were quite right about you being a funny man. Well, let's start. It's difficult, very difficult to deal with, because funny means very intelligent. Okay, right. Okay, so actually I moved to other things. I moved to language history and social linguistics. I wrote books like Language and Politics in Pakistan, Language Ideology and Power, which is a history of language learning among the Muslims of South Asia, and from Hindi to Urdu, which is again a history of Urdu, but it's a social and political history of Urdu. So I was doing those things. That was the main reason, and the other reason is that literature is actually a very difficult subject to write on. My first PhD is on literature. It is so difficult that actually I ran away from it. Because you read 25 novels, in the end you say one thing about them and the other person says, no, this is nonsense, this is not true. And I am glad that I did, actually, because then you had the chance to write this book, which takes on from where I left, actually.
Oh, exactly.
Yes. So
yes,
it's David Waterman's book, which I would like you to read. This takes on from where I leave. So I leave on 1988, and he actually starts from a little later, most in
a little bit later.
Yes, a little bit later.
There's a little gap in there.
Yeah. So.
Okay. And so, any regrets about leaving just when it was getting interesting?
This is true. I mean, after when the last words in my book are that so far there isn't much in Pakistani literature in English of standard. And Babsi Sidwa was there, etc. But very few people. And after that, lots of people came out. Mohsin Hamid, Kamila Shamsi, Uzma Aslam Khan, Nadeem Aslam, Muhammad Hanif, Danial Mainuddin, you just name them. And he has got them. Naqvi, so on. Suraya Khan. Lots of people came. Just when it was getting interested, that's when I left. But regrets, no, because one can do only one thing in life, one or two things, and I've done three, so it doesn't matter. And I wrote those, social linguistic history and so on. I'll not mention all of them, but there it is. So no regrets at all.
Okay, in your book you talk about I can't remember if it's you and then citing other people as well. About not making the mistake of using a non-literary lens to evaluate literature. And I'm just wondering if you wanted to expand on that a little bit or nuance that a little bit, because I do that, in fact. I use non-literary sort of social representation theory, which is not what I would call literary criticism in the pure sense.
For instance, when you're talking about the protagonists as young people meeting with her, you're talking about a whole social situation. Mm-hmm. And you do that when you talk about the geometry of God, and so on. So yes, I see no reason why I shouldn't. Actually, my basic interest was in the social sciences. Only it took a long time for me to find out that it is in history and politics, etc., things which change the world. things which understand the world, etc. Literature does that in a very subtle manner. Literature does that in a very nuanced manner. But then the amount of energy which one spends in one thing, etc., like when, let's say, one is talking about ethnic identity in social science terms, etc., is yields results which more people can understand, and more people can use them for or against policy, but more people can use them. Literature, on the other hand, aesthetically beautiful, etc., gratifying in many other ways, touching our sensibilities in very deep manner, etc. And yet, you have to read all these number of books, etc. Almost everything after which you have written about, etc., is political novel, etc. And yet, who is going to read all those books? Not many. So that's why I stuck to the first, that is the social science thing. There's some regret that I actually should have gone on to at least know about what was happening. I do know a little bit. A lot was happening in Urdu also. But knowing in the literary sense, in the sense in which people like you is actually probing them and deeply writing about them. That's knowing. And not just reading them and then leaving them. So yes, that I do regret a little. But not really much.
Okay. In a panel earlier today, we were talking about national categories for literature. You know, whether we're talking about Pakistani literature, whether we're talking about world literature. I know that you mentioned in your book Zulfikar Ghoz's view that he doesn't really consider himself a Pakistani writer. He merits, nevertheless, a full chapter in your book as a Pakistani writer. And I'm just wondering if you want to say anything about that, about not only those national literary categories, but also the fact that that the Pakistani writers that I talk about and that you talk about are very often hybrid creatures. They're part of the diaspora, whether they live here or there. They're very much influenced by at least two countries. Huh?
Okay, right. Actually, the term Pakistani is to be understood not through the only through the passport you hold. It is about, for instance, I begin over here in this one with Ahmad Ali.
Yep.
Ahmad Ali. Now, Ahmad Ali his major book was written when he was in India. Twilight in Delhi, and his later books, which were written here, were never as good as the first one. And yet he's talking about a dying era, a dying culture, and that is one of the major themes of that time. It's a time of change. It's a time of modernity. It's a time when one of the most important themes is tradition versus modernity, and that's what he's writing about. He is writing about the world which is dying and a new world which is being born. You can't leave him out, so I had to put him in. Similarly, this kind of theme. After the Babsi, you were talking about Ghosh, Zulfikar Ghosh. He was born in Pakistan, and I remember I wrote an article in which I said that Pakistan, the land of his birth, haunts him and stays in his writings because he leaves this land and he becomes an alien. So the effect of alienation, the consciousness of being an alien, the consciousness of alienation, actually informs his poetry, informs the novels. Even when the novel is placed in Latin America, it is about this alienated character. This Zulfikar Ghosh, who goes away from Sialkot, goes to Bombay, and then goes to England, and then the US, and always not here and not there. And he actually mentions that he changed his name too. His name was Ghaus.
No, I didn't.
Yes, and he changed it to, he said, in Muslim communities we called ourselves Khwaja, and in Hindu communities Ghosh, because it was dangerous to have a fully Hindu name or a fully Muslim name. So there it is. So it comes to names also. Yeah. So this whole theme of what are the special themes and how they relate to the politics of the era. How they relate to how people see themselves, how they place themselves. We were talking about maps. I mean, that is exactly what cartography is. Where do these characters place themselves,
Right.
etc. So this happens throughout in literature. That's what I've placed it out in the Zulfikar Bose and others.
Okay. In your book, you talk a little bit about the two extremes of evaluating Pakistani literature. We go from the Orientalist, this is primitive literature, which has not yet come along the theological spectrum to be fully grown literature yet, and the other extreme being a patronizing view where everything that comes out of of this new literature is somehow seen of value, but in almost patronizing ways.
Yes, up to 1988, this is the sort of view one could hold. I mean, because people either didn't talk about Pakistani literature at all, or they compare it unfavorably to African literature in English, Indian literature in English, saying, there's not much in this country. Or they said, what little it is, no, they're good boys, good boys. Sort of patronizing attitude. Because there was so less. But this has changed after that. I mean, after when I stopped reading and writing, as you rightly said, after that things have changed tremendously. I mean, nobody is saying this about people like Mohsin Hamid or Kamala Shamsi, and they're not saying this about it
Not
anymore.
at all, no.
So the attitude of the critics has also changed. Now it is really a more mature kind of literature. But then it's a mistake to think that all Pakistani literature was always this infantile thing. It wasn't. There was Urdu literature. There was Pashto literature. A lot of classical literature in Pashto. And there was a lot of classical literature in Punjabi. Some of the world's best. And there was Sindhi literature. So we are only restricted to literature in English,
right.
And that too, novel and short story in English. Because poetry, there was quite a lot of good poetry. I mean, reasonably good poetry in English, even in the 1950s and 60s. So that there was. Kalim Umar and Maki Qureshi and Tawfiq Rafat, Atar Tahir was one of them. Lots of people. So that there was. So this attitude has changed now because the literature itself has changed. Yeah, and I'm glad that it has.
Okay, me too. Wow. History and literature. What's the formula to articulate those correctly so that you're not becoming too didactic, and yet if this is a literature which is very much rooted in history, what's the formula, the magic formula to make that work?
In my view, there is no magic formula. But when one looks at a historical novel, let's say Charles Dickens' Barnaby Rudge, here it is, Gordon Droid's, almost a forgotten thing in British history, but through the eyes and the involvement of this idiot child, innocent idiot child, etc., who gets caught in this and goes to jail. Barnaby Rudge comes out that the era becomes alive. Nobody would have read about the Gordon Droids otherwise, but if you read Dickens, then you know what was happening. Similarly, Tale of Two Cities. Both Paris and London and that era come alive because of the touch which Dickens gives to it, etc. And of course we have Leo Tolstoy, his huge work, etc. on the war, etc. And so literature brings history alive. There is no magic formula, but there is a kind of a weaving through of consciousness of literature treating history and being treated by history in such a way that actually history becomes alive through those characters. And we have it. I mean, the 9/11 and after that, all the novels which we have are those which otherwise it is something which one reads about. It's a text in history, and one shudders and puts it on. But if you look at reluctant fundamentalists, for instance, you understand what's going on.
Yeah.
Here is not one person's tragedy. Here is the torture of almost a whole consciousness of a whole era of a generation.
Right.
That is the kind of thing which literature brings about.
Yeah.
So I think there is no magic formula, but in the hands of an imaginative, intelligent writer, history becomes alive. So they serve history while they are serving literature.
Yeah, and the work you mentioned, the reluctant fundamentalist does a good job too of giving an ambiguous representation of the situation, which allows the reader to if you've seen the movie that's based on the novel as well. Have you seen the movie?
I have not seen the movie. I thought it would be too disturbing.
Yeah, I thought the same thing, because the novel that you mentioned is ambiguous enough that that it allows you to create something in your head, and then the movie didn't correspond to what was in my head.
No.
So my initial reaction was not so good. But then I realized the movie did a pretty good job of preserving that ambiguity finally. And we could expand to what you've just said about history to politics, for example.
Yes.
Most of the writers I know, they reject the idea that their writing has an overt political message.
Yeah.
When I read them, I seem to find political messages, but the writers always deny that. They don't like to talk to me. And I think for the same reasons that you've just mentioned. Yes, I'm sorry.
Actually, I'm surprised that the writers deny that, because most of them, ones you have treated in this book of yours and ones which I have read, are actually doing a good job representing the politics of that era, etc., and being affected by that politics.
Right.
I think there is some kind of a mental block in there, and that is that politics is about politicians running after power, and therefore we are not writing about it. But they are writing about what happens to people when people do politics. And politics is almost everything we experience as beings. So I think they should not be reluctant, but I think our understanding of politics is different from maybe what the writers understand.
I think you're probably right.
Yeah.
Your survey goes up to 1988, and in your book you regret that the writers of the time had not yet addressed, the 1971 war, for example. And yet the writers who are coming along now, a generation later, are. Any reflections on why the delay?
That is difficult. I mean, even Urdu writers, Mustansir Tarar, for instance, Iraq has written later one of his major books in 1971. Almost all the work on 1971 actually comes later for some reason. I myself had written a short story, that too later, not just then, but it was written in 1974. It was published only for reasons of modesty. I did not put it in this book. I thought it wasn't good enough, but somehow Oxford University Press and others have put it in different texts, and that was what. But they were just short stories. I mean, a proper novel, etc., they all come later. I really don't know the reason. Either everybody was too stunned and therefore not fully ready to grasp what had happened. Whatever the reason was, that there wasn't much. There was some poetry though. There was some poetry, both in Urdu and also in Punjabi after 1971. But the major novel, the major work in fiction, comes much later, 10 years later.
Right.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Well, the folks who are keeping time for us are telling us that we need to move on to questions. Who's got a question?
I think we can have 5 more minutes of discussion, and then we can move on.
We can see if there are questions, unless you have something else you want to say. Yeah? We can move to questions, because something tells me in this audience there must be a question. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Thank you. You mentioned that since 1988, the quality of literature in English in Pakistan has improved quite a lot. Don't you think that this has been at the expense of Urdu literature as well? For example, I believe that, what I see is that before 1980s, there was a very rich Urdu literature. Since then, there is a bit of rich Urdu literature, but not a lot of it. Don't you think that there's a correlation between the quality of English literature and the decline of Urdu?
Sir, as far as I know, Rajinder Singh Bedi died, the older generation died, but Urdu literature did not suffer. There is a lot of Urdu literature, and a lot of Urdu literature dealing with politics, etc., and our political history was written after 1971. So Urdu, I see I'm not an expert on Urdu literature. So if other people are, then they are entitled to their opinion. But whatever I have read suggests that in Urdu there was no falling off really, neither in Pakistan nor in India. Whereas in India the Urdu language suffered otherwise. Literacy in Urdu did decrease in this script it did decrease. But Urdu literature, especially poetry, especially the ghazal, that is still being produced, and the novels are being produced, memoirs are being produced, safarnamas are being produced, people travelogues, etc. So Colonel Muhammad Khan and Shafiq, those people are, of course, they died or passed away. But new people were born, and they are still writing, and they are going on. The evidence is that the sections around us mostly deal with Urdu literature. Yeah.
So my name is Muhammad Noman, and the student of English literature, and I'm studying in the International Islamic University, and I have read your story, short story, The Snail, in my course, Pakistani literature in English. So my question is about that story, that what do you find today that the same snail which you mentioned in the story, they exist in our society still?
Which story of mine did you read?
The snails.
Oh, I see.
The snail.
Okay.
And
that they exist. Of course, you know what this story is about. The story is really okay. The story is, here is a snail who sees a wonderful creature who is swimming completely naked. And says, what a wonderful creature, how brave swimming. Look at us snails. We live in these horny things around our back, and we shrink as soon as somebody comes. We are so scared. We are not worth living. This wonderful creature is worth living. This wonderful creature is a human being. But the snail comes in trying to find it, and it always comes in a swimming pool. And so always finds a wonderful creature swimming without any clothes. One day the snail actually comes and stays there longer, and finds that this wonderful creature comes out, puts on some shells, loose ones, and then puts on another shell, a coat, and then sits in another shell, which is a car, and runs away, and then his heart breaks. That's the story. The story is that human beings have more shells than any other creature, and that we can't face the world without our shields, etc. And those are the lies which we build around ourselves, the sort of face we prepare to meet the other faces in the world, etc. As so we are not without those false shades around us. That's what the story is about. Of course, such people are everywhere. They're not about Pakistan. That's the world. Human beings are like, they have to be. Because you can't be completely yourself unless you are alone in a single island.
What I'd like to know is who qualifies, for example, I enjoy reading. I read mostly in English, but I do not read Pakistani authors. And the reason I don't read Pakistani authors is because I never connect with their characters. Whereas if I'm reading a foreign author, and I'm a person who just likes reading, I don't have a degree in literature or anything. So if I'm reading a foreign author, so I'm reading, even if I'm reading Dickens, I can connect with the characters. I can say, okay, this guy is, what a human being is like. I do not connect with Pakistani authors, and especially I read Danial Moinuddin's In Other Rooms, Other Wonders, and it's got prizes. I hated it. I hated it because there was not one character that I thought, okay, this is a Pakistani that I have met. So my question is, who decides which Pakistani literature is good? Why don't Pakistanis decide it? English literature.
Madam, you decide. Life is too short unless you're a professor and you're writing in order to get tenure or something, or writing a PhD thesis, in which case you've got all kinds of nonsense. Otherwise, it is your decision. Our life is short in this planet. Read whatever interests you. And it doesn't matter what other people think about it. You're not reading for them, you're reading for yourself. So, however, foreign has to be qualified. James Joyce does not have a single character. Ulysses, for instance, is a novel which is more like it's a tome, and it's unreadable. So there are foreign writers also who write a lot of nonsense. I mean, if you consider that nonsense. On the other hand, if you consider that as very clever stuff, you can do that also. So it is not a question of nationality. It is a question of our taste. And I think you have the right, like I have the right, to decide what we want to read. So without any guilt, just read whatever you like. Okay.
We have time.
I used to read comics, I still do. I have no guilt about it. None at all.
And if anybody tells you, yeah, if anybody tells you should write a PhD dissertation, you should follow Nancy Reagan's advice and just say no.
That's okay. I'll do without a mic. My question is to both of you. Does drama have a place from 47 to 88 or later?
Later you answer 47 to 88. Well, that's the easy
There is
stuff.
a chapter on drama in this book, yes.
No. I'm talking about drama as creation.
Okay, look, since this is a history, it looks at everything which may be dubbed as drama. There isn't much good drama, in at least written in Pakistan. Hanif Qureshi is my beautiful laundrette, etc. Okay, but that wasn't written. Not that it matters, but there isn't really much good drama up to 1988. After 1998, over to.
After 1988, I haven't the slightest idea. I never looked at drama in my study.
Actually,
Why not?
well,
You
you're
can't
not
do everything. We'll have to get Premji to come in here. Right? He's the drama specialist.
Look, actually, to be serious, seriously, there is a debate as to why there isn't good drama in not just Pakistani English, but also Urdu. Agha Hashar has copied Shakespeare. So Agha Hashar, one of the most famous dramatists in Urdu, the work is really second-hand. And there's a lot of rhetoric in it, etc. And it becomes very, very artificial, let's say. Imtiaz Ali Taj, better in some plays, not like Agha Hashar, but nevertheless, not of the highest level achieved in Urdu poetry, in Urdu short story, in Urdu novel. So the drama has always been weak. Now the debate has always been, is it because of Islam or because of something else? I don't know really. I don't know. And yeah, acting drama, that I can understand, that there might be something on it. Even then, the drama is held every year in major places, colleges and universities. So that is there. Good drama is not written that much. On the TV, there is some good drama, but not anything compared to the best, let's say in the 18th century in England. A lot of good drama was written over there. That hasn't happened here. So.
And of course, if you want to include movies and dramas, the current Pakistani, no? Movies don't count? Okay.
Why not?
One from this side.
My name is Uli Shafqat Khan. I'm a graduate from GC University Lahore in English literature. As you said that before 1988 there was not much Pakistani literature in English, and after that there is a boom in Pakistani literature writing in English language. So my question is, are these modern Pakistani writers that we claim of that they are Pakistani, and that is a separate issue here, is this a natural outcome of the political, economics scene that we are facing in Pakistan, or is it that we are writing in English and we are starting writing in English just because of some international pressure that we have to write in English?
There is no international pressure of writing poetry or drama in English at all, none whatsoever. And so the reason why this might have happened, actually, one can conjecture. One conjecture is that the number of the middle class which actually uses English has grown, very much so. So obviously, out of that very large growing middle class which has gone to English medium schools and is fluent in English, because it has grown, there's a possibility that the number of people who write creative work has also grown. So that is one reason. The other one could be that these are people, the young writers in English are people who travel internationally, and they come across Indian literature in English, African literature in English, etc., and they start questioning as to why they cannot write, and they do. And so, and thirdly, the very fact that Zulfikar Ghosh, Babsi Sidhwa, etc. were there, and Babsi Sidhwa was among them, got international fame, Zulfikar Ghosh also. Because of that, they became models. So there were these models from the 50s and 60s which inspired later generations. So all those reasons. But international pressure, none. There is an international pressure why you should be here. And you know, that kind of theory is we can give those theories to almost everything we have, but they are not on substantially research grounds.
You mentioned how 1971 was a sort of a particular moment in Pakistani history, and a lot of literature came out as a reaction to what people witnessed and saw, especially writers. And later on, when you talk about the period after 1988, and you talk about writers like Muhammad Hanif, who are also contending with changing political realities, and then if you go further on, for example, 9/11 comes as a moment, as an important moment for writers to engage with. A lot of literature reacts to that. A lot of writers in diaspora, like the reluctant fundamentalists, and H.M. Naqvi's book, Homeboy, they both contend with that. So why do you think is the literature a reaction to these moments that are taking place? Is that how writers are contending with these realities?
Yes, of course. I mean, but you know, that is true that these very harrowing incidents took place internationally. Homeboy, as you rightly said, after 9/11 attacks, etc., and other things, etc. But earlier too, many things happened. Hassan Nasir was tortured in jail, you know, and during Ayub Khan's days. Lots of things happened then also. 1947, for instance. Babsi Sidhwa mentions that in one of her novels, and there's almost nothing else, etc. There is Khushwant Singh's A Train to Pakistan was, of course, written by Khushwant Singh in India. So, and Toba Tek Singh, a very important short story, was in Urdu. So, even then there were incidents to which people did not react, right? And here were incidents to which people did react. And after 1971, there is a response, but always a delayed response. So, no one formula fits all cases. Sometimes there is something one feels that literally people are going to respond and they don't. Or they do respond but much later. Sometimes they respond immediately and a lot of responses there. I mean, day before yesterday, this young activist was killed in Karachi. Maybe someday somebody is going to write a wonderful short story about it. I use wonderful in the sense of going deep into the heart and probing, not in the sense of only something beautiful to look at and read. Because it is a very harrowing incident, it is a milestone, and it is something to be recorded in literature, to be responded to. So there's no formula, unless you have something to add to this.
Okay, I'll take this opportunity to ask a question from Dr. David Waterman. And I don't know whether a lot of you know that his specialization and research work is in Pakistani history and culture, which is why he's here moderating the session. And I would just ask you, sir, that you have been part of the Pakistaniyat editorial team, I guess.
I was.
Yeah, you were.
Until I had the bad luck of being elected head of department, and then I didn't have time to do that anymore.
So this word Pakistaniyat, I'll come to this word. I'm sure you would come across a lot of different notions when you were working in that team or when you have done your research work for Pakistani history. What, in your sense, is the true essence of Pakistaniyat in the historical phase of our country?
Oof. How much time do we have here?
You answer it. I love it.
On the clock. The true essence. Oh, good heavens. The true essence. What is the true essence? How do you get to the true essence of anything? I spent 5 years on the editorial team. In fact, I was one of the founding members of that journal with Masood Raja, who's at the University of North Texas right now. He's from Islamabad, by the way. And a lot of the impressions that I have about what is important, especially from the Pakistanis who were sending articles to us, had much less to do with those big historical events, those culture quakes, if you will, 1947, 1971, and had a lot more, they were a lot more concerned with the everyday issues of what's going on in Pakistan right now, and certainly concerned about history, where Pakistan has been, but certainly even more concerned about where Pakistan is going. And I happen to know that at least half of the articles that came into us had to do with education. People wanted to talk about education in Pakistan. People want to talk about basic health care. They want to talk about water rights, you know, and the fact that China is damming all of those rivers up in Tibet, which means that South Asia is soon not going to have any water left. And those kinds of everyday issues. And so, and of course, not to mention Islam, because if there are, 1.5 billion Muslims on the planet, that probably means that there are about 1.5 billion slightly different interpretations of what that means to be a Muslim. And so all of those things come together and gave me the impression that I still have today, that Pakistanis are very much interested in getting beyond those big cultural quakes and getting on with the everyday.
That one aspect of Pakistani history that really intrigues you, and to keep going about and research doing for this particular country, about its culture, about its history. What's that one particular phase of Pakistani history that really intrigues you?
Well, if I'm working on the contemporary authors, it's really what's going on now that interests me the most. Yeah, contemporary history, not even modern, but contemporary. Right now, I read the papers from, well, at least dawn most every day, and I try to keep up with what's going on. I even was kind of following the election down in Karachi, the by-election there, right? That was supposed to be close. Yeah, right. But yeah, it's what's going on now today, and where we're all going in the future that interests me. Yeah. Okay, I have to end it. We're all supposed to go next door now for the, or no, downstairs. Where are we? Downstairs for the closing ceremony, and then some Sufi music after that, right? I believe.
But you can close the session.
Yeah. Okay. So, thank you all for coming. Any closing remarks, or?
No, thanks very much indeed.
What you should all do is buy both of our books. That way you will have a history of Pakistani literature from 1947 to
1988. If you buy this one, then yes, up to now, contemporary.
Round of applause for our guests, please.
All right. Could I get you to sign my book, Professor?